ignored by the insiders, the elites, who debate these things through the media and in the Parliament. Now, I don't think you need to be John Maynard Keynes to work out that if you lower the demand for housing by cutting the immigration program, you do something to stabilise the price of housing or even bring it down. It's a simple proposition. I mean, Year 11 economics, the first thing they learn is about supply and demand in market economics is the main determinant of price. If you increase the supply, you do something to hold down prices. If you reduce the demand, you do something to hold down prices. So what we get in Australia at the moment in the great debate about housing affordability is only half the story. Because just about the entire system, through the political and media elites, focuses on the supply side. And there's a big debate about how can we build more housing, how can we increase the supply to do something about affordability. Well, what about demand? A place like Sydney has 80,000 extra residents per annum. Melbourne has 90,000. And it's mainly fuelled by Australia's 200,000 plus immigration program each year. And per head of population around the world, we run the biggest immigration program in the West. The Western world, we've got the biggest immigration program per capita. So wouldn't it just be plainly logical to put the demand for housing as part of the equation when considering housing affordability? So why the cone of silence? Why the Trappist monk approach to the demand side in the housing market? Why doesn't anyone talk about the common sense of bringing down the world's biggest immigration program to give some relief on housing prices, relief for the home buyers? Well, it's a classic case of a convergence of vested interests. I mean, modern politics is very much tribal. It's run by groupthink. You can sit in one of these left or right-wing echo chambers and perusing information on the internet, and you never hear a view, an alternative point of view that might challenge you and make you think, oh, well, there's something else that can be pursued here. So politics is very tribal, and you've got the two main tribes of left and right agreeing they won't discuss immigration, they won't discuss a cut to population as a way of improving housing affordability. And then you've got more naked vested interests in the system. You've got the left-wing attachment to open borders. People can come and go as they like in Australia, and of course that all fell apart and was disastrous for the more than 1,200 asylum seekers who drowned on the oceans between Australia and Indonesia. So they're still attached to open borders even though it's been a disaster, so they support Big Australia for that reason. For the Labor and Liberal Party, in their machine politics, their factionalism, a big migration program is a tool they've weaponised for ethnic branch stacking. I was at a meeting the other day talking about how Labor has used ethnic branch stacking as an improper process in factional politics, and a bloke yelled up, stood up and yelled out, I'm from the Liberal Party, we do it too. So on both sides, Labor and Liberal, the more migrants coming in, the more opportunities to bring people into the branches as part of the factional power plays. So Labor and Liberal agree with Big Australia for that reason, and it's also a useful electoral tool talking to so-called peak ethnic groups to try and get their votes. And there was a time, of course, where the Greens didn't support Big Australia. They, on sustainability grounds, wanted to have a cut to the migration program. Well, that's gone out the window. They don't talk about that ever since the retirement of Bob Brown, essentially, and the size of their refugee intake means that they too would be a party of Big Australia if they were ever in some form of coalition government. So you've got the political parties who erect the cone of silence around immigration and its impact on housing affordability. The property and housing industries, of course, they want more people coming in because that's more money as you build the houses and you develop the property. The big retailers, they love Big Australia, more people walking through the door to buy their goods, easy money. The financial sector, the home loans. Just earlier today I was talking to someone who's got a friend who works for one of the big banks who wrote a piece saying, well, isn't it obvious that you reduce immigration, housing will be more affordable? And he was told not to write that anymore. You can stick that in the bottom drawer. We don't want to hear that. We want to dish out the housing loans. The big advertising industry, of course, they advertise for all these other industries and make money out of it. The Department of Treasury in Canberra is very much pro-Big Australia, big 200,000 plus immigration program, because it's the easy way for Australia to achieve economic growth. In recent times we've been patting ourselves on the back that we've established the longest period of economic growth of any Western nations, surpassing the Netherlands. Australia's had 25 plus years of economic growth. But the truth is, most of it, in recent times, has been sustained by the big immigration program. It hasn't been sustained by productivity and competitiveness. There was a very good piece by Adam Crichton, an excellent economist, in the Australian newspaper on the 6th of March, where he wrote as follows: GDP per person is surely a more relevant criteria for how we're travelling economically. And far from 25 years of unbroken economic growth, on that measure Australia's had recessions in 2000, 2006 and late 2008. So per capita, GDP came down in those years. He says technically we've had 3 recessions if it's measured by per head of population. Indeed, Japan, long considered an economic basket case, has achieved almost the same level of GDP per capita growth of Australia over the past 5 years. So that's a telling story, isn't it, that we've pretty well had the same true level of economic success as Japan per head of population, but their population is falling. So we sustain our GDP figures artificially. That per head of population, we're not going so great. And Treasury, easy way to get economic growth, and the politicians love those figures. Who's the Treasurer who wants to go out and announce a recession? The politicians love the idea of artificially inflated GDP figures, so that also sustains the big Australia, big immigration program ethos. So you see right across the political system advocates saying just look at the supply side in housing, don't look at housing demand through immigration. And of course all these people live in the inner city. If you're living in the outer suburbs, the congestion, the urban sprawl has made life dysfunctional in terms of getting around. I live in southwest Sydney there near Camden, and the population growth is enormous. In terms of supply, there's plenty of housing being built. Malcolm Turnbull's Assistant Minister for Housing, Angus Taylor, who's my local Member of Parliament, has openly admitted that there is a city the size of Canberra being built between Penrith and Camden. So Sydney has no shortage of housing supply. We're building Canberra between Penrith and Camden. There's plenty of housing there. Drive along Camden Valley Way between Leppington and Narellan. There's housing estates popping out of the ground like mushrooms. They're everywhere. So there's lots of supply, but it's not keeping up with the demand. The fact that we're adding 80,000 people to Sydney every year, mainly driven by immigration. So the supply side issues basically have been resolved. Angus Taylor admits that. But the inner city big Australia advocates have got no awareness of how dysfunctional outer suburban life is becoming because of sprawl and congestion. I know of people in our community, professional people who've worked in the Sydney CBD, who are giving up their jobs because it's torturous to drive on the road, to try and get to a train station, to get a reliable train to get you into the city. This is the new water torture in urban form. And they're saying, oh, well, I'm professional, I'm qualified and all that, but I just can't put up with the commute. I'll get a part-time job closer to home for quality of life reasons. So this is a big drain on economic efficiency when this sort of thing happens. And you've also got the social inefficiency that housing costs are so high. Essential workers, teachers, firemen, nurses, ambulance staff are finding it very, very hard to live anywhere close to the places they work. So you're losing economic and social efficiency because of urban sprawl and congestion. You know, Malcolm Turnbull was talking about an urban vision for a place like Sydney where everyone would live within half an hour travelling time of their job. What's he going to do? Buy us all a helicopter? I mean, maybe he's got a helicopter stashed away in the garage, I don't know, but it's just ludicrous to think you could say we're all going to live within half an hour. For people in Western Sydney, quite frankly, leave home in the dark, get home in the dark, don't see their property in sunlight for most of the year. These travelling times are horrendous. And the supply side fetish of just build more housing estates is making Sydney dysfunctional on its urban fringe. So the more sensible thing to do is define an immigration program for the people who live here. You see, this is a novel concept, isn't it? We'd have a nation-first immigration program for the benefit of the residents of Australia. And that program would be defined on a big cut from 200,000 plus to about 50,000 a year. We still have some population growth, but bring it down to about 50, which would be a wonderful stabilising influence on housing prices, would stabilise some of the urban sprawl and inefficiency. It's a logical solution. But because of all these vested interests, what really is a collaboration screwing over people in the suburbs, we don't even hear this part of the political debate, which is a dreadful shame. Now the public themselves, of course, know the truth. There was an Essential poll recently where by a factor of 2 to 1, people said they'd support an immigration cut for the purpose of housing affordability. So the voters aren't silly, the public know these realities, the people living in the congestion know exactly what's going on. 2 to 1 in favour of a immigration cut for housing affordability. Now this unholy alliance in the political system is dreadful. I wrote something in the Telegraph on Tuesday where the Huffington Post, a left-leaning outlet, was attacking Judith Sloan, who was in the Australian newspaper, making the common sense economic point about lower demand bringing down prices, and she was attacked for not talking to economists. So the Huffington Post, one of these website outfits, said, oh, we'll talk to economists. And they rang up a bloke called Shane Garrett at the Housing Industry Association. Well, wouldn't he be independent? Wouldn't he be independent? Forget about lower demand having an impact on bringing down prices. His argument was, get this, his argument was, if you lower migration, housing prices will go up. No one's ever heard of this theory before, that if you lower demand, prices go up. But this is what he said. And his argument was, we won't have enough migrants to build the houses. Really? I mean, we're dealing with fantasy here, aren't we? The world's gone nuts. And people are saying this. From the Housing Industry Association, we won't have enough migrants. Well, I drive past lots of building sites. That's essentially where I live. And they're established companies and people have come out of TAFE and they do a good job. But the idea that they're flooding off the plains at Mascot to go work on housing estates up and down Camden Valley Way is just ludicrous. So anyway, wanting to get the stats, I rang Peter Dutton's immigration department and spoke to the helpful lady there who worked out that basically the people who come in on the migration program who've got skills in this area of construction, a lot of them are engineers and do the big civil construction projects, it would be less than 1% of the home building workforce comes out of migration each year, less than 1%. So I thought, oh, well, I'll ring Mr Garrett down there. He lives in Canberra, of course. Probably got a nice place on Lake Burley Griffin, no congestion, best road system in the country. And I'll put this stat to him and see what he says. And I asked him, look, you've got this unusual theory here that if we don't have more migrants, there won't be any housing construction in Australia and the prices skyrocket. I said, what evidence have you got for this? What statistics have you got? And he said, I haven't got any. I said, well, where'd you get this from? Where'd you get this wacky theory from? I said, oh, it's anecdotal. What does that mean? He just basically made it up, didn't he? He made it up. The Huffington Post, he's from the industry, he's from the housing mob to make the money out of this. The Huffington Post from the left of politics will tell you, oh, you know, we're sort of against exploitative capitalism, but they write this stuff because they're in favour of big Australia, and then they attack the economist Judith Sloan, who's got the sensible piece in the Australian. So, you know, in an era of fake news, the Huffington Post takes the gold medal, don't they, for printing this rubbish. It's just absolutely absurd. So that's what we're up against, essentially. That's what we're up against. Every single interest group, every single political party has got a vested interest here to do over the suburbs, to do over the new home buyers, and you really got to get the word out by any mechanism possible that there is a better way, a sensible policy. It doesn't involve changing the racial composition of the immigration program. I'm against that. I think multiculturalism coming from Western Sydney has been a wonderful success overall for our community. Great success. It's not about any racial component in this argument whatsoever. It's about urban efficiency, housing affordability, and defining, for the first time in a long while in our country, an immigration policy which is for the benefit of Australians who live here right now. So, it's tragically overdue, and I want to thank William for organising the forum where at least we had one outlet in the paucity of sensible debate where these things can be said.